how the Iron Throne physically and morally corrupts absolutely everyone who occupies it. Any lingering hope of Rhaenyra Targaryen being the pure, unblemished hero of this story literally went up in dragon fire by the time the credits rolled. You know, her dark turn might be way better developed than Daenerys' sudden descent in Game of Thrones, but make no mistake, the corruption here is just as absolute.
To help make sense of all the shifting allegiances, major lore drops, and the real-world metadrama we're unpacking today, here's a quick roadmap of what we'll cover. First, we'll look at Rhaenyra's dark turn.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Rhaenyra's dark turn, the point of no return.
So it's pretty clear Rhaenyra is incredibly high on her own Iron Throne supply at this point. She actually shows up at the Great Sept of Baelor with her Kingsguard and demands that the High Septon publicly anoint her. And when he refuses her, just like he did before, she doesn't just throw him in a dungeon. No, she labels him a traitor on the spot and orders Aelin of Hall to execute him right there on sacred ground. And what's truly chilling here is exactly how she convinces Aelin to pull the trigger. She reminds him of his Valyrian blood, basically telling him that their gods are way more powerful than the faith of the Seven. She's actively sacrificing her own humanity and the sanctity of the entire realm's religion purely to grab absolute power.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Forgotten Targaryen Prophecy.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this moment is massive. Standing there with her heir, Joffrey, her guards, and her counselors, Rhaenyra just drops the biggest Targaryen secret of them all, Aegon the Conqueror's hidden prophecy about the great evil coming from the north. In fluent High Valyrian, she declares, "I am the prince that was promised," claiming that only her specific bloodline can save Westeros. But you've got to notice the reactions of her own people here. Grand Maester Orwyle and Sir Torrhen Manderly exchange these looks that clearly say, wow, she has completely lost her mind. Declaring yourself the literal chosen one to the masses is a totally wild gamble for loyalty.
But that brings up a glaring question for us as viewers. Why does absolutely no one remember this in Game of Thrones? Think about it for a second. A monarch publicly announces to her subjects that a massive supernatural threat is coming from the north. Yet, 160 years later, during Robert Baratheon's rebellion, it's completely forgotten. The historical record is just blank. It's really important to highlight that the source material, the Fire and Blood book, never links Rhaenyra to Aegon's prophecy at all. This is entirely an invention for the TV show. So, what happens? Does this revelation just get scrubbed from the history books, or do the people of Westeros just write it off as the ravings of a mad queen?
Which leads us to Section 3, Book versus Show at Tumbleton. Some really messy deviations here.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fascinating and sometimes chaotic choices the showrunners are making to tweak the lore. In the book, we get the infamous two betrayers, where both Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer defect to the Greens at the same time. But in the show, so far only Ulf betrays the Blacks. He basically realizes, hey, I've got a dragon now, I don't really need to serve anybody. The show also makes the physical battle on the ground so much more chaotic. Instead of Sir Brendan Hightower fighting Roddy the Ruin, the show has Ormond Hightower hack off the Northman's arm. Then there's this wild moment where Roddy's blood sprays right into Ormond's mouth, followed by a totally invented, brutal end where Roddy stabs Ormond literally right through the butthole. And then Ulf's dragon just wipes them both out. It's a wildly messy deviation from the text that totally shifts the power dynamics we expected.
Let's look at the collateral damage in Section 4, Helaena and the Butterflies, a tragic parallel.
Here, we are given one of the absolute most heartbreaking visual parallels in the entire franchise. Poor Helaena. After getting that grim warning from Mysaria that she and her baby will never actually be free, she's thrown back into captivity. She finishes weaving this fiery tapestry, which, by the way, very notably depicts a mighty Rhaenyra sitting on the Iron Throne surrounded by flames. She just leaves it on the windowsill and leaps to her death. Her lifeless body is impaled on the iron spikes of Maegor's holdfast down below. And if that looked familiar, it's because this is the exact identical leap King Tommen takes 160 years later in Game of Thrones. It's just a devastating, cyclical pattern of deposed, innocent royals finding the exact same tragic escape.
Now, immediately after Helaena falls, the show gives us a highly specific visual, literal butterflies taking flight. If you've been following the behind-the-scenes drama, you might remember George R.R. Martin's famous 2024 blog post. He openly complained that showrunner Ryan Condal's deviations from the source material would create a butterfly effect of narrative issues, specifically warning of toxic butterflies for the final seasons. So by having literal butterflies swarm the screen right after Helena's tragic and slightly altered death, Condal seems to be neutrally but very directly referencing Martin's real-world critique right there inside the narrative of the show.
Moving to the supernatural side of things, Section 5, The Secrets of Harrenhal.
dark magic returns. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it finally defines the resident goth girl of Harrenhal, Alys Rivers. Fans have been speculating about it for years, and the show just flat out confirms her identity. She is the unnamed wife of Harren the Black. Her backstory is incredibly tragic. A century ago, when Aegon the Conqueror's dragon, Balerion, burned the castle, Alys's son was horrifically burned. Desperate to save him, she turned to ancient dark magic, stuff older than the land itself. But it failed. Her boy died anyway. And when she tried to take her own life out of grief, she realized she couldn't. She was eternally cursed. Stripped of her name and her title, she has been doomed to serve every lowly lord who holds Harrenhal for 100 years.
Alys and Aemond seem completely poised for a wicked future together, especially with the sudden arrival of Aegon II and his dragon, Sunfire. Aemond actually seeks atonement here, which is shocking. He admits his sins and offers his own life for trying to kill his brother. But Aegon spares him, purely because he realizes he needs Aemond to have any hope of defeating Rhaenyra. They've got this massive counterattack ready to roll out, but there is one huge, glaring problem halting the entire operation. Aemond's colossal dragon, Vhagar, is mysteriously missing. It's one of the finale's biggest unanswered questions, and it completely stalls the Green's momentum.
Finally, let's look ahead. Section 6, setting up Season 4, a disrupted foundation.
So, the crucial point is that Rhaenyra honestly excels at alienating her allies. Look at the board right now. She is almost entirely isolated. She lost Corlys Velaryon by flat-out refusing to legitimize his bastard sons. She literally confined Baela to the Red Keep just for being insolent. Adamic Hull is visibly disturbed by the Queen's erratic behavior and the fact that she imprisoned his father. And perhaps most dangerously of all, she fired Lady Mysaria. Sure, Mysaria was a pretty terrible master of whisperers for Rhaenyra, but as a free agent with a vast spy network, she is incredibly dangerous. Especially with those nasty rumors floating around that Rhaenyra ordered the death of Helena's son, Mysaria is perfectly positioned to turn the masses against the Queen in retaliation.
Which leaves us with the ultimate provocative question as we look toward the final season. Rhaenyra is on incredibly thin ice. Aegon is back in play. Tumbleton is in ruins, and the small folk are actively turning against the crown. With all these massive deviations we've unpacked today, from the two betrayers being split up to Alys Rivers' newly confirmed century-old backstory, will the Dance of Dragons actually end the same way it does in the history books? Or are there more toxic butterflies on the way, ready to completely rewrite the ending of this devastating civil war? It's a fascinating thought, and definitely one we'll have plenty of time to debate before we finally return to Westeros. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes on the skies.